We've also had another day of Republicans just being fundamentally unable to answer questions about what Trump did here and whether or not they really support it. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson today earned laughter when he tried to say that he didn't want to talk about the pardons anymore. He didn't want to look back. Didn't want to look back at those pardons from yesterday. He only wants to look forward. And then right after he said that, he announced that Republicans are going to go back and reinvestigate all of January 6th all over again. House Speaker Mike Johnson not able to get out of his own way, not able to figure out how to answer questions about these pardons yet, and they're not going away. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich criticizing Trump's pardons today. The pro-Trump right-wing editorial page at the Wall Street Journal criticizing the pardons today, calling them rotten. Senator John Thune, the Republican leader in the Senate, pilloried for trying to insist that the pardons were considered on a case-by-case basis when they absolutely were not. Everybody with a January 6th conviction, everybody got a pardon or commutation. There was no case-by-case consideration, Senator. And on top of all of that, now tonight there has been an extraordinary rebuke of these pardons from the court system. And again, we're going to talk about this more a little bit later on, but I just want you to listen to this. I'm not sure this is widely circulated today. I do not think you will have heard about this. But this is from Judge Beryl Howell of the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. Just listen to this. I'm just quoting directly here. The United States government moves to dismiss with prejudice the 9-count superseding indictment against defendants DeCarlo and Nicholas Ochs. The two defendants in this case, one of whom founded the Hawaii chapter of the Proud Boys and served as a senior leader of the group, both admitted under oath their criminal conduct at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Both men admitted throwing smoke bombs at law enforcement while on the grounds of the Capitol. Both men admitted to breaching the Capitol building and defacing the Capitol building and stealing equipment from law enforcement officers responding to protect the building and its lawful occupants from the rioters. The current posture of this case is that even after the defendant's admission of egregious criminal conduct, both outside and inside the U.S. Capitol building, and the government expending significant time and resources in identifying defendants, investigating their criminal conduct, and filing 3 separate indictments against these defendants, the government now seeks to dismiss the pending indictment against these defendants. Judge Howell then explains that while the court, under law, doesn't have much of a choice to continue a criminal case if the government decides to drop it, she's sort of compelled to drop it if they wanted to drop it. She says the law does, quote, vest some discretion in the court in terms of how to handle the details of this unusual situation. And check this out. This is astonishing. Quote, to ensure that the government's request for dismissal of criminal charges sufficiently protects the public, the government may be required to submit a statement of reasons and underlying factual basis, which must be substantial, to justify the dismissal of an indictment. Here, the government's cursory motion provides no factual basis for dismissal. The only reason provided for this instruction is the assertion that this action, quote, ends a grave national injustice that has been perpetrated upon the American people over the last 4 years and begins a process of national reconciliation. That was in Trump's order that all of these cases should be dropped. Ends a grave national injustice. Judge Howell continues, quote, no national injustice occurred here, just as no outcome-determinative election fraud occurred in the 2020 presidential election. No process of national reconciliation can begin when, I'm quoting the judge here directly, when poor losers whose preferred candidate loses an election are glorified for disrupting a constitutionally mandated proceeding in Congress and doing so with impunity. That merely raises the dangerous specter of future lawless conduct by other poor losers and undermines the rule of law. She says, quote, having presided over scores of criminal cases charging defendants for their criminal conduct outside and inside the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th, which charges were fully supported by evidence in the form of extensive videotapes and photographs, admissions by defendants, and testimony at trials. This court, she says, cannot let stand the revisionist myth relayed in this presidential pronouncement. quote, the prosecutions in this case and others charging defendants for their criminal conduct at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th present no injustice, but instead reflect the diligent work of conscientious public servants, including prosecutors and law enforcement officials and dedicated defense attorneys, to defend our democracy and rights and preserve our long tradition of peaceful transfers of power, which until January 6, 2021, served as a model to the world, all while affording those charged every protection guaranteed by our Constitution and our criminal justice system. As to these two defendants, she says, as to these two defendants specifically, both admitted their criminal conduct under oath after consultation with their attorneys and pursuant to plea agreements to which they agreed. Bluntly put, the assertion offered in the presidential pronouncement for the pending motion to dismiss is flatly wrong. Judge Beryl Howell goes on to grant the government's demand that she dismiss this case because she has to do that. But she refuses to do what Trump's order said she had to do, which was to dismiss it with prejudice, which means these charges could never be brought again. She just refuses to do that. The judge says, quote, nothing about the government's reasoning for dismissal warrants entry of dismissal with prejudice. Dismissal with prejudice, she says, would bar any further prosecution of defendants for their offense conduct at issue. This result would be improper here, when the defendant's own admissions of criminal conduct, including throwing smoke bombs at law enforcement officers who were trying valiantly to prevent rioters from entering the Capitol building, that conduct provides ample basis for criminal prosecution. Judge Howell then orders this case dismissed, this case effectively closed, but she flat out refuses to order the case closed forever. This directive from Trump effectively told the judge to close it with prejudice so the case could never be brought again. She said, no, you're wrong on that, on the law, and I won't do it. And also, in so many words, by the way, what you're doing here is obscene. This is one of 3 rulings by a federal judge today, absolutely rebuking Donald Trump and his new Justice Department for trying to make these January 6 cases disappear, to try to make it like January 6 didn't happen. The decision to spring these guys from prison and to stop the ongoing trials of people convicted or charged with physically attacking police officers, this is a debacle. I mean, morally, it's obviously a debacle. Strategically, in terms of our country holding itself together, it's a debacle. But it's a political debacle. The public doesn't like it. The police don't like it. Not even the Trumpy police like it. Even the Fraternal Order of Police, which endorsed Trump and initially appeared flummoxed by this pardons decision, they've now come out and denounced it as well. I mean, the violent felons who Trump ordered freed yesterday are already today starting to be arrested for other violent crimes. His political allies on Capitol Hill are supposed to start carrying major water for him on everything he wants to do. They are already finding it totally untenable to carry water for him on this first thing that he has decided to blow all his political capital on. I mean, some of the felons he freed, including one of the paramilitary leaders who Trump just freed from his 18-year federal prison sentence. This guy turned up at Capitol Hill today. Turned up on Capitol Hill. There are rumors circulating that Trump had wanted to bring his felons, had wanted to bring these guys who violently attacked police and were convicted for it. He wants to bring them all to the White House, too. That's the sort of thing that probably sounded great at a Trump rally. Probably sounded like it was something the people wanted when you were stewing about stuff like this at a Trump rally, at one of your Fidel Castro-esque, 3.5-hour-long rambly speeches where most of the people left before you were halfway through it. Probably sounded like a great idea that everybody would love you for. But you know what? The country is not a Trump rally. And the country appears to be repulsed by the very first big thing that Donald Trump has done in his new presidential term. And whether or not he can see it, every other Republican in Washington is learning it very quickly, at least All of them who can read polls are learning it very quickly. Any of them who can read polls or who can hear the questions from their own constituents back home and from reporters about what the heck is this mess? With freeing these convicted violent felons. And does the senator support it? Does the congressman support it? And can you explain why? And saying you haven't seen the details, or you don't know exactly what's happened here, or you want to look more into it, that answer isn't gonna fly. It's an absolute debacle. And I think importantly, as my good friend Chris Hayes often says, politics did not stop when Donald Trump was elected. The laws of political gravity still apply. And Donald Trump's first major action in his second presidential term on political grounds is a political debacle. And that matters.